At 5:05 p.m., the engine dies 35 kilometers off Brazil's coast. The current turns the disabled boat broadside toward Black Rock. The impact is not cinematic. It is one violent scrape, a broken rail, and cold seawater pouring over the deck faster than you can bail it out. You have seconds to choose between sinking beside the island or committing to a landing that almost no member of the public is allowed to make. The boat tears free and disappears around the point. Behind you is open ocean. Ahead is one of the most restricted islands in Brazil. Your radio transmits one broken message. A patrol vessel can approach after sunrise if the sea settles. You must stay alive for 12 hours. This is Ilha da Queimada Grande, better known as Snake Island, roughly 35 kilometers from the coast near Itanum, Sao Paulo. The golden lancehead lives nowhere else on Earth. It is not a monster, and it does not patrol the island looking for people. That makes the danger harder, not easier. An ambush predator survives by remaining unseen until something comes close enough to strike. Recent estimates cited by the Instituto Butantan suggest about 3,000 individuals, averaging roughly 55 snakes per hectare. That does not mean one snake every few steps in a neat pattern. It means the odds of entering another animal's space are unusually high. Your first survival rule is simple: do not turn fear into movement. Every unnecessary step creates another chance to miss what is already there. Before darkness arrives, you inventory what came ashore: one flashlight, a damaged radio, a bottle with about 700 milliliters of water, a rope, and a basic first aid pouch. You also have wet clothes, one injured palm, and no antivenom. The nearest real treatment is not on this island. The lighthouse looks like shelter, but reaching it requires climbing through the habitat that creates the danger in the first place. Staying by the sea avoids dense vegetation, but the coast offers narrow ledges, breaking waves, wind, and almost no protection from spray. There is no perfect option. Survival begins by choosing the danger you can observe over the danger hidden in leaves and branches. You choose the open rock, above the current spray line and away from overhanging vegetation. It is uncomfortable, but its boundaries are visible. The famous story of lighthouse keepers killed by snakes is a legend, not a confirmed historical record. The real island does not need invented victims. Its real danger is enough: an endemic venomous snake, difficult terrain, difficult landing, and no immediate medical response. The species evolved after rising seas isolated the island from the mainland roughly 11,000 years ago. With few small mammals available, adults became strongly associated with hunting birds, often using branches and vegetation above the ground. This changes how you inspect the world. The ground matters, but so do the places where a hand, shoulder, or face might pass. You use the flashlight before every contact, not after. Rock first, then cracks, then nearby vegetation, then the space above your head. You never reach blindly under a stone, inside a root cavity, or behind the damaged boat debris that washed ashore. The rope is useful, but tying it to vegetation would force you into the exact zone you are trying to avoid. You anchor it around solid rock, low and simple, creating a boundary against a fall without building a trap around your legs. Now you mark a safe footprint: one place to sit, one place to stand, one route to the higher ledge if the sea rises. You do not build a shelter from branches. On this island, collecting materials creates more risk than a few hours of exposure. You protect the flashlight like a medical resource. Continuous light would feel safer, but a dead battery before dawn would remove your only inspection tool. The plan becomes a cycle: listen to the sea, scan the platform, check the radio, then sit still in darkness. The darkness is not proof that snakes are moving toward you. It is proof that your ability to detect them has collapsed. At 7:10 p.m., the radio crackles. The rescue crew repeats one instruction: remain near the shore and do not attempt the lighthouse climb. That message removes the most tempting mistake. A building on a hill looks like safety, but a route is only safe when you can inspect it. You take your first drink, 2 small mouthfuls, not because dehydration is already severe, but because rationing prevents panic later. There is no reliable freshwater source you can reach safely from this ledge. Searching for one would trade a manageable shortage for hidden contact. A sound comes from the brush. It may be a bird settling, a lizard, wind, or nothing you can identify. You do not investigate. Curiosity is expensive here. Every answer would require entering a space where your eyes are slower than the camouflage. At 8:02, a wave reaches farther than the others and wets the lowest part of your safe route. The sea is now changing the map. You must move, but only along the route you inspected before darkness. You relocate the radio, water, and first aid pouch first. Then you move your body. Resources should never be left below a rising wave line. The higher shelf is narrower and closer to one wall of vegetation. It solves one danger and compresses your margin against another. You inspect the nearest leaves from a distance. Nothing moves. That is not the same as nothing being there. At 8:35, the beam catches a shape that does not match the branch. The head is angled toward the open shelf. You are less than 2 meters away. The snake did not arrive for you. You moved into the edge of its space. The worst response would be a sudden retreat across wet rock. The second worst would be trying to move the snake. You stop. You lower your center of gravity. You keep both hands visible and wait for your breathing to slow. Then you retreat 1 foot at a time along the same inspected line, never turning your back and never stepping toward the cliff. The snake remains on the branch. The encounter ends because distance returns, not because one side wins. This is the episode's central rule. On Snake Island, survival is not defeating the animal. It is avoiding the accident. A bite from a Bothrop snake can cause intense pain, swelling, bleeding, and serious tissue and clotting problems. Severity varies, but delay is dangerous. If you were bitten, the correct response would begin with calm, distance from the snake, and immediate communication with rescue. You would remove rings, a watch, or anything that could tighten as swelling develops. You would not cut the skin or suck the wound. You would not apply a tourniquet. Brazilian health authorities warn that trapping venom in one area can worsen local damage. If clean water were available, you could wash the site gently. Then the priority would be urgent evacuation to a hospital that can provide the correct antivenom. None of those steps neutralizes the venom on the island. First aid buys order. Antivenom and medical monitoring require professionals. That is why avoiding the bite is more important than carrying a dramatic survival trick. At 9:40, the flashlight flickers. You have used more battery than planned during the snake encounter. You shorten each scan. 5 seconds across the platform, 5 across the vegetation edge, then darkness again. The silence between scans becomes the hardest part. Your brain begins to turn every leaf into a snake and every rope curve into a body. Panic would tell you to keep the light on. Discipline says uncertainty is not the same as immediate danger. At 10:25, rain begins as a fine coastal drizzle. The rock becomes more reflective, and the rope absorbs water. Rain does not summon snakes, but it reduces traction and makes visual patterns harder to read. You shift your seated position only after scanning the exact place where your hand and boot will land. One careless brace against the vegetation could put your palm beside a snake you never saw. At 11:50, the radio battery drops again. You switch from constant monitoring to scheduled checks at the top of each hour. The water bottle is below half. You are not in medical dehydration, but thirst is beginning to influence every decision. You take one measured drink and wet your mouth without emptying the bottle. The final portion is reserved for first light. After midnight, the island feels larger because you can no longer see its limits. In reality, your safe world has shrunk to 3 square meters of rock. You check the rope anchor, not by grabbing blindly, but by following the line with the beam until the knot and rock are fully visible. A small mistake appears. The line has shifted closer to the wet edge. You correct it now, while conditions remain manageable. Most disasters grow from small problems left alone: a weak battery, a loose knot, a wet foothold, one unplanned step. At 1:15 a.m., the snake on the branch is gone. That absence gives you less information, not more freedom. You do not search for it. The safest assumption is that any uninspected space may be occupied. At 2 o'clock, fatigue starts changing your posture. Your chin drops, your hands drift, and your attention narrows. Sleep is dangerous because waking movements are automatic. You cannot afford to roll, reach, or stand before inspecting. You use short, controlled rests. Eyes closed for minutes, watch alarm set, radio secured near your chest, and boots planted inside the known footprint. At 3:08, a sharp scrape comes from below. This time it is the rope moving against rock under a stronger surge. You move the line higher and shorten it. The task takes 30 seconds, but every contact is inspected before your hand commits. The sea remains the visible enemy. The snakes remain the hidden risk. The two dangers demand opposite behavior. Move away from one, move less around the other. At 4:20, the clouds thin. A faint line appears over the Atlantic, and for the first time the island begins to regain shape. More light does not make the island safe. It gives you better information, which is the resource you have lacked all night. You can now see a second golden lancehead on a branch above the path you considered taking to the lighthouse. The night proves the core lesson. Danger was not everywhere in a supernatural sense. It was concentrated in the places you might have touched without looking. At 5:05, the radio receives a clear signal. The patrol vessel is approaching the western side, but the landing window will be short. Rescue creates a final trap: urgency. After 12 hours of caution, the instinct is to rush toward the first person you see. You do the opposite. You scan the route, secure the radio, cap the water, and wait for the boat to align with the swell. The rescue crew throws a line. You attach it to the existing rock anchor before moving toward the lower shelf. One step, pause, inspect. A second step, pause, inspect. The same discipline that kept you alive must survive the final minute. A wave lifts the boat beside the ledge. You transfer weight only when the crew signals and the hull rises level with your feet. Minutes later, the island is behind you. The golden lanceheads never chased you. They did not need to. The greatest threat was a chain of ordinary errors: moving without seeing, reaching without checking, climbing for comfort, or rushing because help was close. And the final contradiction is that the animal most feared on this island is itself critically endangered, vulnerable because of its tiny range, and threatened by illegal collection. A chromosome-level genome study reported in a 2026 journal volume is helping researchers examine its evolution, toxin genes, population history, and conservation. Snake Island is not a challenge course, a tourist attraction, or a place to prove courage. Its restriction protects people and a species found nowhere else. So, could you survive 12 hours here? Only if you understood that the bravest decision might be the one that looks like doing nothing.